I am Linda van Tolberg for National Security News. The 14 South African soldiers who were killed in battles with the M23 rebels in the Democratic Republic of the Congo are being laid to rest this week by their families. At a ceremony where their remains were handed over, President Cyril Ramaphosa reiterated South Africa's commitment to its mission in the DRC. However, defense analyst Helmoed-Römer Heitman criticized the stance, arguing that South Africa lacks the big bat necessary to engage in regional conflicts. In an interview with National Security News, Heitman suggested that South Africa should acknowledge its diminished regional power, remain quiet for a decade to rebuild its military capabilities, and focus on negotiating the release of soldiers effectively being held as prisoners of war by the M23 rebels.
M23 has now also taken Bukavu town, which makes the situation a lot worse than it was. It also removes another airport that could have been used maybe for a relief operation. Look, the Eastern DRC, if you want to be brutally honest, geographically and ethnically, is probably more related to Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi than it is to the rest of the Congo. But there we are. We've got a colonial border situation. Uganda, Burundi, and Rwanda, Burundi, let's stay north-south. All three of them have a genuine argument. It might only be an excuse, but it exists for intervening in the DRC because there are guerrilla groups in the DRC that want to topple their governments. Lord's Resistance Army, Allied Democratic Forces would like to run raids into Uganda. The FDLR, the guys that tried the genocide in Rwanda, well, I suppose now it's more their sons, or maybe younger brothers, but nonetheless, they're there. They would like to topple the Rwandan government. They say so quite openly. You have what used to be FNL, I think now the Red Tabara faction, that would like to topple the government in Burundi. So that gives each of those countries an excuse or reason, depending on how you look at it, to intervene. Because the DRC government, like the Zaire government before, has done nothing to neutralize those groups, and nor has MONUSCO. The only time MONUSCO has acted against anybody, the ADF, for instance, is when they attack targets inside the Congo. There's been no attempt that I can see to disarm those groups and try and pacify them a little bit. With the net result that there's an open invitation essentially to all three countries to intervene. At various stages they have. 1996, all three were involved. 98, it was primarily Uganda and Rwanda. Currently, it's primarily Rwanda. At various stages, the DRC government has given Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi permission to conduct operations inside the DRC against these guerrilla groups. Currently, it's Burundi. Previously, it was the others. So there's all that. Then, yeah, the mineral rights are a factor too. Rwanda probably is making a lot of money out of some of the mines, although some of the most important mines aren't even in the territory that they're controlling. So that may not be entirely true. The funny part is that in some circles, the minute minerals were mentioned, everybody jumped on the bandwagon and said, ah, yes, America. In fact, I may be wrong here, but I think the primary user of coltan in the world is China. I mean, they manufacture a lot of laptops and cell phones. So, why America? What's the normal knee-jerk reaction? It's not to say China's involved in this directly. I'm sure they aren't, but indirectly maybe, through their companies. Ditto in Cabo Delgado, for instance, where there's a lot of illegal mining, a lot of illegal logging. And the logging, certainly, there seems to be quite a lot of evidence and stuff goes to China. That question I would ask is anybody at the political level in any country, and I'll come to South Africa in a minute, actually keen to stabilize the east of the DRC? For so many people, so much money out of the fact that it's not stable, and you don't have to pay taxes, and you don't have to have insurance, and you don't have health and safety issues, occupational health and safety regulations. Why would you want it to be stable? Which raises the question, why did the government in Kinshasa want MONUSCO to leave? Sure, MONUSCO was ineffective for 20 years because it was too small for the region and too ill-equipped, but they were doing something. At least it was better than nothing. So why did Kinshasa want them to leave? Were they getting in the way of something? A little bit like why was Maputo so negative about SADC and South African involvement in Cabo Delgado? It does raise questions. Back to South Africa. Again, if we accept that a country sinks or swims by its economy, South Africa is, despite the best efforts of the government, is a manufacturing trading economy. I mean, not manufacturing as much as we used to. So economic policies are so weird. But we do manufacture and we want to export. Potentially the most lucrative, most profitable export market is Africa south of the Sahara. because we are the closest manufacturing economy. So it is very much in our own selfish self-interest for Africa south of the Sahara to be stable, peaceful, and increasingly prosperous. The better off they are, the more stuff they can buy from us. I don't have the exact numbers on the top of my head anymore, but I remember in 2013 there was an analysis, and if I recall correctly, exports to the DRC underpin something like 160,000 jobs in South Africa. And I do remember we looked at some number crunching at the time, that the tax take, the income tax of those 160,000 people, the company tax for the companies involved, and the VAT and all the normal stuff that tax authorities grant, was substantially more than it cost South Africa to maintain 4 infantry battalions and 2 helicopter squadrons to allow the rotation of one of each in the DRC. So, from that alone, it makes sense. People say, Ramaphosa has got mining interests in the DRC or his family have or whatever. Perhaps, but bluntly, who cares? South Africa as an economy benefits from a stable, prosperous DRC. So the one country that maybe really doesn't want an unstable DRC is South Africa. So justification is there for an intervention, just as it was for intervention in the Central African Republic, primarily to secure the 1,500-kilometer river border of the Congo. The problem is that South Africa no longer has the military clout to do it. If you go back a little bit of time, President Mbeki understood, I call it the regional imperative, that we sink or swim with the region economically. Also, if the region unravels, who the hell would invest in South Africa? You're not going to invest in something right next to an unraveling state. If your long lost Aunt Edna left you $1 million, would you buy a house next to a deteriorating slum? And the answer is no. So President Mbeki understood that. He never quite understood that you need a big baseball bat to go with that grasp, that understanding. President Zuma did finance. We saw that during the defense review. But he seems to be in, shall we say, otherwise engaged with the Gupta family and things, so nothing much ever came of it. I'm not entirely sure that President Ramaphosa understands that all the nice words need a baseball bat to back them up. It was Theodore Roosevelt, I think, who said, speak softly but carry a big stick. And it works. It's been demonstrated to work. We no longer have a big stick. When things went wrong in Bangui in 2013, wrong partly because, as per usual, South Africa, even old South Africa, we used too small a force with too little equipment to try and do the job. But when it did go wrong, South Africa could still respond pretty quickly. 4 Gripens with bombs, etc., were deployed post-haste to Kinshasa. 2 attack helicopters, a special forces group, and 3 Oryx helicopters to Gemena, just south of Bangui in the DRC, and a parachute combat team in Hercules to Entebbe on standby. So we could have reacted if the fighting had stopped at that point. That was 2013. Today we no longer have the airlift. Most of the Gripen fighters are grounded. Most of the pilots aren't current. The attack helicopters didn't fly for over a year. We never got around to buying the standoff weapons for the Gripens, for instance, or the Rooival. So what South Africa could do in 13 in Bangui, we can no longer do today in a much bigger situation. And if you go back, intervention in Lesotho in 98 was a bit of a mess, but it sort of worked at the end. The intervention in Burundi was a hell of a high-risk operation because there was no way to get people out of it when sour. But that worked. We actually got everywhere to sit down, talk to each other, etc. The 2006 deployment to Comoros worked. Very short notice, very well done, actually. The deployment to Bangui, the initial deployment was exceedingly well executed. But we didn't follow through as per doctrine, in fact. So the force on the ground was early entry force, too small, too weak. But then actually the actual mission effectively failed. The deployments, SADC deployment to Mozambique, to Cabo Delgado, a laughably small force with no air support, had zero impact. They killed some guerrillas, but no real impact, no lasting impact. And after roughly 3 years, they declared ourselves successful and went home. The insurgency continues. And lesson not learned, the SADC had this weird idea that 5,000 SADC troops with no air support would achieve in the Eastern DRC what 15,000 MONUSCO troops could not over 20 years. Now, who came up with that idea, I don't know. And then, just as in Cabo Delgado, the full 5,000-strong force never materialized. And in fact, nor did the South African 2,900-strong component. It seems to be less than half of that on the ground. and much less from Malawi and Tanzania. The Malawians have now withdrawn, apparently. So it leaves us, and Tanzania has also apparently said, we did peacekeep it, which is nonsense. President Ramaphosa keeps saying this, the Minister of Defense keeps waffling about peacekeeping. The mandate of the mission was to neutralize armed groups like M23. Now, neutralizing is not peacekeeping. Peacekeeping is when both sides to a conflict have agreed to settle but don't quite trust each other. So effectively, this was a combat mission. And SADC went there to neutralize M23, and M23 neutralized SADC. Embarrassing, but there it is. And it seems, unfortunately, South Africa government simply has not taken this aboard. They're waffling about continuing the mission, completing the mission. The really sad part is that I'm given to understand, I can't swear to it, I wasn't there, but I'm given to understand that the Chief of Defense Intelligence directly briefed President Ramaphosa to say this is a high-risk mission, we can't do it. I'm also told by a good source that the chiefs of the Army and the Air Force raised the same objections. And they were cooled down by the Chief of Defense Force, who I believe, I don't know this, I suspect, had himself tried to persuade President Ramaphosa not to, or was told to get on with the job and shut up. The authority of the civil power. The guys in uniform must do as they're told. So they did their best. And they pretty much did their best. They deployed to what the government thought was a peacekeeping operation. They deployed artillery, and they put some anti-aircraft systems on to try and deal with some of the drones that M23 uses. So we don't have real anti-drone systems. So they pretty much deployed the best they could. I would have liked to see some mechanized element, but nonetheless. The only mistake may be on the military side. Apart from not simply saying, no, we refused to go quite flatly, which I couldn't really do, I suppose. The only mistake really was to move into a base that had been laid out for MONUSCO during benign peacekeeping times, which is overlooked by high ground on which the other guys sit, which is in among residential areas who can't really shoot back with heavy weapons because you're going to start killing civilians. It's got all of those problems.
The soldiers from the SANDF is in a sticky situation now. How do we get out of that?
That's one of those very good questions. There have been a lot of rumors that they don't have enough ammunition. Whether that's or not, I don't know. Those rumors started early. That might just be the Wenwe Brigade criticizing the current management. The SANDF is not, in fact, short of competent officers. Yes, there are idiots in it, but there were idiots in the old SADF. I knew some of them. I did work with some of them, so I know that. But I also know current management. And there's some pretty damn good officers there. And the officers there was quite a lot of experience. Now, not all of them. I don't know who physically is on the ground in the Congo. But there's no reason to suspect that they're idiots. So I don't know about the ammunition pool. It may be true, it may not be true. I do know the SANDF's ammunition stocks have been low because there was no money to replenish stocks as ammunition was used up for training or time expired. So it might be true. But that aside, they are now stuck in the base at Sake, and some of them on the airport at Goma. The territory around them is controlled by M23 and or the Rwandan army, depending who you listen to. And now apparently as far south as Bukavu. So what do? They can't go anywhere. We can't fly in supplies to them or reinforcements because Goma airport is closed. And now Kavumu airport, north of Bukavu, is now also no longer available. In fact, M23 put out a statement that they control that airport too. So that leaves only Beni in the far north, which is a good long drive through ambush-prone roads to get south. And of course, we don't have any airlift to fly anything anyway. It's chartered aircraft. And the problem, you fly somewhere with a chartered aircraft, the first problem is they throw it ahead to see if it's safe. Because they're not stupid, they don't want to lose the aircraft. The second problem is when it's less safe and the runway might get under fire, are they still going to fly in? So the bottom line at the moment is the troops are stuck there. We can't resupply them, we can't reinforce them, and we can't relieve them. So really the only logical thing now to say is, okay, that was a mess. Do please excuse us while we quietly tiptoe home. And essentially we have to ask M23 and Rwanda to allow us to fly them out. And it's going to take time with all the equipment, assuming they allow us to take our equipment. There's some other more long-winded options, but essentially we need M23 to not ambush us on the way out. And we have to probably provide food because they're probably running short of food stocks now. That's a problem. Now, Malawi apparently has withdrawn some of its troops. I'm not sure how the hell they withdrew because they were in the same base. I'm not sure we necessarily have to withdraw the South African troops with MONUSCO. They're at Goma Airport. But MONUSCO itself might not be under threat this way. But the SADC force went in specifically to counter M23 and can hardly expect M23 to allow them to replenish. Now, at the handover of the bodies, the president waffled on about we must continue and complete the mission. Well, I don't know how we do that. We didn't have a clout to start with. We've now got less clout. They put us apparently 800 troops into Lubumbashi. That's more than 1,000 kilometers southwest, with very nasty, windy roads, very ambush-friendly roads from there to there. And some forces apparently in Burundi, I'm not sure what's there. That might just be a medical team for evacuation purposes. So, a relief operation, great. I'm not sure anybody's, and even if we were stronger, I'm not sure anybody's asked the question of, if we start a relief operation, what are M23 and Rwanda going to do about the troops that got trapped at Goma? Are they going to leave them there relaxing and catching a tan? Or are they going to round them up and stick them in a prison somewhere? Or march them off, Bataan death march stuff to a prison camp somewhere in the Berry Mountains where we'll never find them? We don't know. I've been a little bit negatively surprised by President Kagame's behavior. Getting the bodies back of the guys who died. Now, Kagame is a soldier. So was Museveni. They know better. Soldiers, when it's over, it's over. You don't maltreat the individual. There should have been no hassle to the bodies back. They could just move vehicle, go on a runway, fly in an ambulance aircraft. They can inspect what goes aboard, that only the dead or maybe seriously wounded go aboard, and fly them out. Could have been done in a day. Instead of which there was toing and froing, they went by refrigerated container truck into Uganda, and then there was a post-mortem. Who needs a post-mortem? The guy got shot. We know why he's dead.
Okay.
And then back by a Tanzanian transport aircraft. Now, that is both Rwanda, to that extent Uganda, basically being nasty. And that baffles me a little bit. And I thought better of Kagame in particular on that issue. But maybe he just got very bitter and twisted when President Ramaphosa referred to his army as a militia, which is a silly thing to say about what is arguably the most serious army in sub-Saharan Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Not the biggest, but a very, very serious army of some very serious people. And also, of course, the South African government constantly harping on being a peacekeeping mission. They're peacekeepers. No, they weren't. They were sent there to hunt down M23. So they had maybe just irritated him to the extent where he forgot common decency.
Sure. So it seems there's no resolution. There's no way to get the soldiers out in the way you described. So, what is the future of all this? I mean, do you expect any resolution? Because there was that conference in Tanzania. Ramaphosa flew in and flew out. He didn't seem to, nothing was resolved there. So, what's going to happen?
Well, as like most of those ones, produce nothing. Oh, let's have a ceasefire. Well, okay, great. What about the people that are stuck in Goma? I didn't say anything about them.
Yeah.
So all the troops, they're still stuck there. And the ceasefire, well, happiness. M23s continue to operate. So where does that get anybody? That was a pretty pointless talk shop. Bluntly, my personal view, and I said it in an article, is that South Africa must now accept we are no longer capable of regional undertakings. Got to accept the egg on face, negotiate our way out of this one, then sit down and shut up for a decade while we rebuild the defense force, and then we can think about it in the future. I do think South Africa should play a regional security role, just as I think Nigeria should, for instance, Kenya. It's in each case, it's the country's self-interest. But at the moment, we can't. We've neglected the defense force to the point where we no longer can do that. So what we're doing at the moment is deeply irresponsible. We're pretending to be regional power on what is essentially an overgrown border guard budget. And that doesn't work. And when the bill is presented, it is always presented in the form of bodies.
And that's exactly what happened, but what we saw, and I just wonder, what does he tell the families? Because I see Mr. Ramaphosa was speaking to the families, what do you tell them?
Well, they waffled on about them being heroes and dying in the interests of the country, blah, 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 which is all perfectly true. But it was an unnecessary bungled operation. Well, you don't want to tell the families that, let's be honest. If I lost somebody, would I want to be told it was a disaster? Personally, I'm a bit iconoclastic with this. I don't see why they had the whole dog and pony show in the first place. Now, why not just individually return the body to the family with a military chaplain and a officer going to do the condolences stuff? I've been involved once as a notifying officer stuff, which is not fun. But in this case, okay, it wasn't the notifying officer, it was bringing back the body, but it's also no fun. I've seen it when a family loses someone. It is really nasty. And I don't know, as a family member, would I wanted to sit at Swartkops Air Base while reported politicians and generals drone on? The answer is no. It's a private thing. I wouldn't have wanted that. But that's me. Maybe other people feel differently. I just thought it was wrong. A certain amount of the pomp and ceremony stuff was wrong and unnecessary. It's a somber occasion, not the occasion for hoo-ha. The president had postponing the whole thing from morning to evening so that he could reply to the State of the Nation address in Parliament was wrong. He should have said to the parliamentarians, well, toughies, you're going to have to stay in Parliament a few hours longer. I'm first dealing with this, then I'm coming to Cape Town. A lot of people have said, well, it just shows the disrespect for the military. Nothing particularly new there. But I believe I and other analysts who have commented publicly on the mission have been criticized by the chief for being negative and all that. But, okay, I suppose he's got to say that. I know the man. I don't think he's an idiot. I'm pretty sure he advised the president against it. But, what do you do? If you're the soldier and the president says go, you go. Some would argue you should resign. Well, yes, okay, so you resign, and in the middle of the crisis, somebody else has to find his feet in that situation and take over. That's not very good either. My point of view, I'm absolutely in South Africa playing a regional security role. Not because I feel warm and fuzzy from brothers, but simply because it's in South Africa's national self-interest. We're supposed to look after our interests. The world governments are supposed to do. And if that coincides with the interests of our neighboring countries, well, so much the better. So I think we should, but then you need the clout to do it. That includes airlift, air deployable equipment, the whole thing. Now, and maybe just sit up it during the defense review, which ran from 2011 to 2013, was finally approved in 2015, government being slow. When we started, we were told by then Defense Minister Sisulu that we must not consider the funding issues. We need to think about what South Africa will need in the future. And we must make assumptions, because foreign policy was very wishy-washy. So fine. And they said the funding is up for the national executive afterwards. If they decide they can't afford what you recommend, then we will revisit. Fine. We had to make an assumption. What would South Africa do in the future? And the assumption was the same as in the 2000s, i.e. 3 battalion plus operations, long-term deployments outside the country, plus some smaller stuff. So the entire defense review was based on that. To that was added a directive from President Zuma that South Africa must be able to mount an autonomous combat group level intervention operation by air or sea. He understood the requirements. So all that was in the defense review, and it was approved at the presidency, at cabinet, in parliament, even by Lutuli House in the ruling party's home office. Everybody approved it, and precisely nothing has happened since. And in fact, if you want to be serious about it, nor has anything happened about the 1998 defense review. Now that assumed, or the basic assumption there was that South Africa would never operate in Africa, except maybe 1 battalion for 12 months for benign peacekeeping. Well, it's very different. In less than a decade later, we had 3 battalions outside the country simultaneously, and that wasn't benign peacekeeping either. But even that limited defense review was never implemented. So it is actually amazing that the Defense Force has done what it's been able to do between 98 and now on a steady stream of underfunding and overstretch. I sometimes, there's a whole bunch of people in the Defense Force who work minor miracles on a daily basis to keep the machine running. But it's not going to work forever.
Well, Helmoed-Römer Heitman, thanks so much for speaking to us.